A single mum pulled up to the interview in a beat-up jalopy. All she wanted was a job to feed her 5-year-old daughter and take care of her ailing grandmother. But what she didn't know was that this fancy skyscraper, filled with judgmental stares, held much more than just a job opening. Her past was about to unearth a devastating secret, and it only took a single sentence from her daughter to change everything forever. This story will shock you and warm your heart. Subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're watching from. The old red beetle protested with groans at every turn. Claudia Barrett tightened her grip on the worn steering wheel, feeling the outline of every crack in the synthetic leather under her calloused fingers. She knew every mark, every sound, every secret of that car, like she knew the lines on her own face. Not out of vanity, but out of forced cohabitation with the reflection she saw every morning in the tiny bathroom mirror of her apartment. At 27, her face already carried small maps of worry at the corners of her eyes. They weren't laugh lines born of joy, but trails carved by constant anxiety. The drizzle falling over Seattle that autumn morning made the traffic even slower, as if the universe was conspiring to make her late for the job interview. "Mommy, will it work out this time?" Anna Laura's voice, so small in the back seat and yet so present, cut through the engine noise. Claudia adjusted the rearview mirror to meet her daughter's eyes. 5 years old and with a wisdom no child should possess so early. "Yes, sweetie, it has to." Claudia smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. "Grandma Carol is waiting for us to come back with good news." Anna Laura nodded solemnly, as if sharing the invisible weight her mother carried. On the seat beside her, the folder with her resume, a few pages, no degree, experience in diners, as a nanny in department stores. A life of work that fit on 3 sheets of paper. The Montenegro Enterprises building rose like a glass and steel monument in Seattle's financial district, stark against the grey sky. Claudia parked the Beetle between 2 imported cars, the faded paint of her vehicle looking even more worn in comparison. For a moment, she sat frozen behind the wheel. "You're strong, Barrett," she muttered to herself, using the nickname her grandmother had given her as a child. "You've faced worse." She left Anna Laura in the small waiting area of the reception with promises to return in an instant, and followed the high-heeled receptionist through the gleaming corridors. Each step echoed on the marble floor, making her conscious of her own worn boots, carefully chosen as the most presentable she owned. The interview room was filled with impeccably dressed candidates, with resumes bound in colorful spirals and expressions of studied confidence. Claudia sat in the only vacant chair, holding her simple folder against her chest like a shield. The hours at the diner that morning and the quick cleaning job she had done before coming to the interview had left invisible marks on her body, a weariness that no coffee could disguise. "Ms. Barrett?" It wasn't her name, it was the sentence for the next judgment. She stood up, adjusting the only blazer she owned, bought at a thrift store 3 years before. She followed through a corridor that seemed endless to a dark, wooden indictment. Eduardo Montenegro wasn't what she expected. At 32, he had a vivacity in his eyes that contrasted with the seriousness of the perfectly tailored Italian suit. When Claudia entered, he was absorbed in some document, his reading glasses balanced on the tip of his nose. He looked up without removing his glasses, and for a moment, just a moment, Claudia saw something beyond the businessman. She saw a man. "Please have a seat." His voice was deep, without affectation. "Your resume is different." It wasn't a compliment, but it didn't sound like criticism either. It was a statement of fact, placed on the table like a card in a game she didn't know how to play. Different how? Claudia was surprised by her own audacity. The question escaped before. She could contain it. Eduardo smiled, removing his glasses and placing them on the glass table. "Honest," No frills, no attempts to transform waitress into gastronomic experience manager. He flipped through the resume again. 2 jobs currently. 3, actually. Claudia straightened her shoulders. Waitress in the morning, cleaning. In the afternoon, and I take care of my grandmother and my daughter at night. I didn't put the last one on the resume because it's not paid. Something changed in his gaze. A glimmer of genuine interest replaced the cold analysis. And why do you want to work as a personal assistant? You have no experience in the area. Because I need a salary that replaces 3. The answer came without hesitation. And because I learn fast. I don't have a degree, Mr. Montenegro, but I know how to read people, organize chaos, and solve problems. I do it every day of my life. Eduardo leaned forward, crossing his hands on the table. I don't like lies, Miss, she corrected automatically. Or just Claudia, please. Claudia. He tested the name as if assessing its flavor. I don't like lies, Claudia. So tell me the truth. Why this position? She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her body sink into the upholstered chair. Outside, her daughter waited. At home, her diabetic grandmother waited with swollen legs for her next bandage. In the building's garage, the old red Beetle, representing years of savings, needed a repair she couldn't afford. Because I'm tired of just surviving, Mr. Montenegro. I want a chance to live. The silence that followed was filled only by the discreet ticking of the wall clock. Eduardo studied her with a disconcerting intensity, as if trying to decipher a complex code. Your daughter is in the reception? The question caught Claudia off guard. Yes, Ana Laura, 5 years old. Eduardo nodded as if that confirmed something important. He rose in a fluid motion. Let's get her. I want to meet her before I make my decision. In the reception area, Ana Laura was drawing intently on a pad of paper that the kind secretary had given her. Her brown hair fell in curls over her tilted face, her tongue caught between her teeth in a gesture of absolute concentration that was identical to Claudia's. Is this your daughter? Eduardo asked, watching the girl with genuine curiosity. Yes, Claudia replied, a mixture of pride and apprehension coloring her voice. Eduardo approached, crouching down to be at the child's height. Hello, Ana Laura. What are you drawing? The girl looked up, studying the stranger with the frankness that only children possess. Instead of shyness, she demonstrated surprising composure. Our house, she replied, turning the paper to show him. This is me, this is Mommy, this is Grandma Carol, and this is our red car. Eduardo examined the drawing with genuine attention. On the paper, 4 stick figures, 3 people and a red rectangle with wheels, disproportionately large compared to the human figures. Why is the car so big? Eduardo asked, genuinely intrigued. Ana Laura looked at her mother, then back at the drawing with the peculiar wisdom that some children possess. Because it carries many important things, she explained simply. It carries us everywhere. Mommy says it's our workhorse. Eduardo was silent for a moment, his gaze alternating between the drawing, the girl and Claudia, who watched the scene. With a heavy heart, then he stood up and extended his hand to Claudia. The position is yours, Claudia. Can we discuss the details in my office? The world seemed to stop in that instant. Claudia felt the air leave her lungs, while Ana Laura jumped out of her chair in celebration. See, Mummy? I told you it would work out. Can I call Grandma? While Ana Laura used the reception phone to give the news to her grandmother, Claudia followed Eduardo back to the office, her legs moving automatically. Inside her, a whirlwind of emotions. Relief, hope, fear, gratitude, and something else. Something indefinable that had been born the moment she saw Eduardo Montenegro kneeling beside her daughter, listening with genuine interest to what a 5-year-old had to say about a worn red car. The digital clock on the car dashboard read 10:47 p.m. when Claudia finally parked in front of the small 3-story building where she lived. Her hands trembled slightly as she turned off the engine. Ana Laura had fallen asleep in the back seat, wrapped in the thin jacket she used as a blanket. The first day, as Eduardo Montenegro's personal assistant, had been a whirlwind of information, schedules, contacts, and responsibilities that made her old job seem simple in comparison. "We're here, Princess," she whispered, adjusting her sleeping daughter in her arms. The girl's weight, once so familiar, now seemed heavier after a full day of tension and new experiences. The apartment was silent, except for the low sound of the television on in Carol Lucia's room. Claudia put Ana Laura in the bed they shared and went to check on her grandmother. "How did it go?" Carol asked as soon as she saw her in the doorway. Even with her weakened health, the 72-year-old woman's eyes retained the vivacity and insight that had always characterized her. "Different," Claudia replied, sitting on the edge of the bed and taking her grandmother's wrinkled and cold hands between hers. "He's not what I expected." "Who, honey? The millionaire?" Claudia nodded, helping her grandmother settle against the pillows. The scars from the last hospitalization still marked her thin arms where countless needles had pierced her skin. "Eduardo Montenegro. He treated me with respect, Grandma, introduced me to the team as essential to the operation, not as the new assistant." She paused, adjusting the bandage on her grandmother's leg. "And the salary. It will cover the medication, Ana Laura's school, and there's still some left over." Carol squeezed her granddaughter's hand with surprising strength. "God is good, honey. Finally some light after so much darkness." Claudia swallowed hard, avoiding her grandmother's gaze. The darkness Carol referred to had a first and last name, Henry Santos, her husband who had disappeared 3 years ago. She couldn't stand hearing that name, not even in her thoughts. The wound still open throbbed in her chest every time the memory threatened to emerge. "Let's sleep, Grandma. Tomorrow I have to be there at 7. Later, lying next to her daughter who was breathing softly, Claudia allowed herself a moment of weakness. Silent tears ran down her face as she stared at the peeling ceiling. The cell phone on the bedside table still held Henry's last message, sent on the night he disappeared. "I'm on my way. I love you. 3 years, 4 months, and 18 days. And yet every night a part of her waited to hear the key turning in the lock, announcing his return. In the first weeks after the disappearance, the police worked on the hypothesis of kidnapping, then the one of an accident. Eventually, the one of voluntary escape. No body, no trace, no explanation, just silence as an answer to all her questions. Claudia closed her eyes, trying to push away the memories. Tomorrow would be a new day, a beginning maybe, or just another chapter of waiting. The days at Montenegro Enterprises began to follow a rhythm of their own. Claudia learned fast, not just the practical functions of the job, but also the unspoken codes of that new world. Who had real power? Who just pretended to have it? Who was an ally? Who was an opportunist? She watched and absorbed, remaining discreet and efficient. Eduardo Montenegro surprised her daily. He wasn't the cold and calculating businessman she had imagined. He was certainly strict and demanding, but also fair. He noticed details, asked about Ana Laura, and more than once adjusted meetings so that Claudia could take her grandmother to the doctor. On a particularly chaotic Wednesday, after a succession of tense meetings, Eduardo called her to his office. "Sit down, Claudia," he asked, closing the door behind her. There was something different in his tone, an urgency she didn't recognize. "Did something happen?" she asked, automatically checking the digital calendar. "Did I forget an appointment?" Eduardo shook his head, letting out a tired sigh. "No, nothing." "Like that. It's about your grandmother." Claudia's heart skipped a beat. "Carol, what happened? The hospital called. They tried your cell phone, but you were in the meeting with the investors and left the device on your desk. She had a health issue and was taken to the emergency room." The floor seemed to disappear under her feet. She jumped up, knocking over. The chair? My God, I have to go. Ana Laura, the daycare. I've already taken care of it, Eduardo interrupted, rising as well. I sent the driver to pick up Ana Laura and leave her with my housekeeper. The company car is waiting to take you to the hospital. Go. I'll take over here. Claudia froze, looking at him with a mixture of gratitude and confusion. Why? The question escaped before she could contain it. Eduardo looked genuinely surprised. What? Why are you doing this? You could simply give me the rest of the day off, and that's it. An odd silence hung between them. Eduardo adjusted his tie in an almost nervous gesture, something she had never seen before. Because you would do the same for me, he replied finally, with the disarming simplicity. Now go. Your grandmother needs you. At the hospital, the antiseptic corridors and the smell of disinfectant brought back memories of the countless times she had been there in recent years. The doctor explained the situation in technical terms that Claudia already knew all too well: diabetic decompensation, kidney failure, impaired cardiac function. We need to admit her to the ICU, the doctor concluded, and I fear that the basic plan does not cover all the necessary procedures. Claudia felt the familiar weight of financial worry compressing her chest. How much? The doctor mentioned a sum that made her stomach churn. Even with the new salary, it would take months to raise that amount. I'll take care of it, she said, more to herself than to the doctor. Do whatever it takes to save her. Sitting in the waiting room with her cell phone in her hands, Claudia contemplated her options. Loan? More debt? Sell the car? That old Red Beetle was her only asset of value, her independence, her pride. The phone vibrated, startling her. It was a message from Eduardo. Hospital authorized all procedures. Corporate insurance covers employees and direct dependents. Your grandmother is included. Don't worry about costs. Focus on her. Tears blurred her vision. She didn't know she was included in the company's health plan, much less that it extended to her grandmother. Could it be that Eduardo had— No, it couldn't be. When the doctor returned, she confirmed the information. Everything is resolved, Miss Barrett. Your grandmother is covered by Montenegro's premium plan. We will start treatment immediately. That night, while watching over Carol Lucia's restless sleep in the ICU, Claudia struggled against contradictory feelings: gratitude, relief, confusion, and something else, something she didn't allow herself to name. Her phone vibrated again. It was Eduardo. How is she? The simplicity of the question, the implicit care, made her heart clench in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. Stable, she replied. Thank you for the health plan. I didn't know we had that coverage. The answer took a few seconds. All employees have it. Ana Laura is fine, asking about her grandmother. Don't worry about work. Take as much time as you need. Claudia took a deep breath, looking at her sleeping grandmother, connected to tubes and machines. A question pounded in her mind. Why would a successful businessman show so much consideration for an employee he barely knew? The most obvious and cynical answer, romantic interest, didn't seem to fit. Eduardo had never demonstrated any inappropriate behavior, never crossed boundaries, never hinted at anything. She looked at the simple ring she still wore on her left hand. Henry's last gift before he disappeared. A silent promise of waiting, of loyalty, of faith in a return that seemed increasingly unlikely. That night, for the first time in 3 years, Claudia wondered if she wasn't waiting for a ghost. The months passed in a routine that, despite being grueling, had a stability that Claudia hadn't experienced in years. Carol Lucia, after weeks in the hospital, had returned home with a fragile but stable health. Ana Laura flourished in the new school, now that they could afford a better institution. And the work at Montenegro Enterprises had become more than just a job. It was a space where Claudia felt she was building something. Eduardo Montenegro revealed himself to be an increasingly intriguing enigma. Behind the facade of the successful millionaire hid a man of complexities that Claudia captured in small moments. Like when she found him alone in the office at midnight, looking at the framed photo of his deceased parents. Or when she saw him discreetly donating a substantial amount to Anna Laura's school fundraising campaign without wanting credit for the gesture. It was early spring in Seattle when the old Beetle finally succumbed to years of use. Claudia was on her way to the hospital to pick up Carol's new test results when the engine simply stopped in the middle of the avenue. "No, no, no," she murmured, turning the key repeatedly as cars honked behind her. Panic grew in her chest. Without a car, how would she take Carol to treatments? How would she pick up Anna Laura from school? She called a tow truck and waited on the sidewalk, her cell phone in her hands, calling the garage she knew well. The mechanic's assessment was relentless. The engine needed to be rebuilt at a cost that exceeded the value of the car itself. She returned home by taxi with a feeling of defeat she hadn't felt in a long time. In the apartment, Carol immediately realized that something was wrong. "What is it, honey?" Claudia collapsed on the worn sofa, the words coming out brokenly as she explained the situation. Carol squeezed her hand in silence, letting her vent. "I know how much that car means to you," her grandmother said finally. "It's not just transportation." Claudia nodded, wiping away tears with the back of her hand. "It was the first big thing I managed to buy alone after Henry." The word disappeared stuck in her throat. Carol took a deep breath, adjusting herself in the armchair. There was a determination in her tired eyes. "Claudia, I need to tell you something I should have said a long time ago." Something in her grandmother's voice made Claudia straighten up, suddenly alert. "About what?" "About Henry." Carol paused, as if gathering courage. "I never believed in the kidnapping, honey, never." The air seemed to solidify in Claudia's lungs. "What are you saying, Grandma?" 3 weeks before he disappeared, Henry came here when you were working. He wanted to borrow money. A lot of money. Carol held the rosary she always carried. "When I refused, he said he had a plan B, that he had met people who could solve his problems. Why have you never told me this?" Claudia's voice came out strangled. "Because you were already broken, honey, and then, with the difficult pregnancy, the birth of Anna Laura. I chose to protect you from the possibility that seemed obvious to me, that he ran away, that he abandoned us." Claudia's world, so often rebuilt on ruins, trembled again, but this time, instead of the piercing pain that always accompanied any mention of Henry, she felt something different. A cold rage, a sudden clarity. "For 3 years," she murmured, getting up and walking around the small room. "For 3 years, I believed that something terrible had happened to him, that he would never abandon us voluntarily." "Forgive me," Carol pleaded, tears streaming down her wrinkled face. "I thought I was protecting you." Claudia knelt before her. Grandmother, taking her wrinkled hands between hers. "I have nothing to forgive. You've always been my rock, Grandma, my only certainty." She took a deep breath. "I think deep down I already knew. I just wasn't ready to accept it." That night, after Anna Laura fell asleep, Claudia slowly removed her wedding ring. She looked at the simple silver band, feeling its disproportionate weight in the palm of her hand. Then she walked to the small balcony of the apartment, contemplating the illuminated city below. With a deliberate movement, she let the ring fall into the darkness of the night. Something broke inside her, but it wasn't pain. It was like a cast being removed from a limb that had long been immobilized, painful but also liberating. The next day, Eduardo immediately noticed the absence of the ring when she handed him the day's schedule. "Did something happen?" he asked. with that insight that always surprised her. "My car broke down," she replied, opting for the partial truth. "I'll need a few days to reorganize transportation logistics for my grandmother and my daughter." Eduardo nodded, thoughtful. "Use the company driver while you sort it out," he offered, in a tone that didn't allow for refusal. "Jorge is available. Just schedule the times with him." "I can't accept," Claudia protested automatically. "You've already done too much with the health insurance, and I'm not doing anything more than I would do for any valuable employee," Eduardo interrupted with a gentle firmness. "You've transformed this office in 3 months, Claudia. The company functions better with you. Here, it's an investment, not charity." The way he framed the help as professional recognition, not as a personal favor, allowed Claudia to accept without feeling the weight of obligation. "Thank you," she said simply. "Besides," Eduardo added with a half-smile, "I need you to arrive punctually tomorrow. We have that meeting with the Japanese investors, remember?" Claudia nodded, grateful for the normality of the conversation, for the absence of questions about the missing ring. Eduardo seemed to understand instinctively when to push and when to retreat. At night, while helping Ana Laura with her homework, the phone rang. It was Mariana, the company receptionist. "Claudia, sorry to call outside of hours," she began, her voice hesitant. "But I thought you should know. A man was here today asking for you." Claudia felt a chill run down her spine. "What man?" He didn't want to identify himself. He said it was a surprise, but he seemed strange. When I asked for his name to announce him, he got nervous and left. The world seemed to spin around Claudia. Could it be possible? After all, this time, what did he look like, she asked, her voice almost inaudible. Tall, thin, dark hair starting to thin. He had a small scar above his right eyebrow. Henry. The description was too accurate to be a coincidence. "Thank you for letting me know, Mariana," she managed to say, struggling to keep her voice steady. "If he shows up again, please let me know." She hung up the phone, feeling her heart hammer against her ribs. For 3 years she had waited for a sign, a proof of life. And now, just when she was starting to move on, the past threatened to return. The worst wasn't the possibility that Henry was alive, that somehow she had always known. The worst was the storm of contradictory emotions that the simple mention of his existence aroused. Anger, confusion, relief, fear, and a worrying absence of the love she had once felt. As she watched Ana Laura concentrated on her math exercises, a silent resolution took shape in her heart. Regardless of what Henry wanted, regardless of his explanations or excuses, she would not allow him to destabilize the fragile peace she had built. Not anymore. With renewed determination, Claudia opened a long-closed drawer and retrieved the folder with all the documents related to Henry's disappearance. It was time to seek definitive answers. For her, for Ana Laura, for her future. The torrential rain fell over Seattle that Thursday afternoon, turning the streets into small rivers and the sky into a grey and oppressive mass. Claudia watched the drops run down the window of Eduardo's office while he spoke on the phone in rapid and precise English with some international investor. There was something hypnotic in that incessant pattern, in that nature that didn't care about schedules, appointments, or broken hearts. When Eduardo finally hung up, he let out a tired sigh and loosened his tie in a rare gesture of relaxation. "Ah, you okay?" he asked, surprising Claudia with the sudden change of focus. "You seem distant today." She looked away from the window, meeting his attentive eyes. It had been a week since Mariana had told her about the stranger who asked for her at reception. A week of nervous glances over her shoulder, of jolts every time the phone rang. "I'm fine," she lied, organizing some papers on the table. "Just worried about my grandmother. The new medications are strong." Eduardo studied her for a moment, with that look that seemed to see beyond words. "Claudia," he began, his tone changing to something more personal. "We've worked together for almost 5 months now. I know when something is wrong." She hesitated, feeling the weight of accumulated secrets. A part of her wanted to share, to ease the burden. But another part, the one that had learned hard to protect herself, kept her defenses up. "It's complicated," she replied finally. "It always is." Eduardo smiled slightly, leaning forward. "I have a meeting cancelled in the next hour. If you want to talk, I'm a good listener." The invitation hung between them, genuine and without pressure. Claudia felt something break inside her. Not a violent break, but like a dam that finally gives way under constant pressure. "My husband disappeared 3 years ago." The words came out before she could contain them. "Or rather, I believed. He had disappeared. Now I don't know any more." Eduardo didn't show surprise, just nodded slowly. "I knew you were married," he admitted. "The ring, until recently. And sometimes Ana Laura mentions a father who isn't present." "You never asked," Claudia observed. "It wasn't my place to ask." The silence that followed had a different weight, as if the air between them had turned into something denser, more meaningful. "Henry disappeared on a Tuesday night," she continued, the words now flowing like the rain outside. "He went out to buy medicine for my grandmother. He never came back. The police found the car abandoned on the side of the road to Redmond, with the door open and the keys in the ignition. There were no signs of a struggle, nor of an accident." Eduardo listened attentively, his face a mask of concentration. "At first we thought of kidnapping, then accident, maybe amnesia. I spent sleepless nights imagining him lost, injured, needing help." She took a deep breath. "But there was never a ransom. There was never a body. Never," her voice faltered. "Now my grandmother has admitted that he was in financial trouble, and last week a man with his description showed up at the company looking for me." Eduardo straightened up in his chair, visibly tense. "Here, at Montenegro." Claudia nodded. "Mariana saw him. She said he got nervous when she asked for identification and left quickly." A heavy silence settled as Eduardo processed the information. When he spoke again, his voice had a different, more cautious tone. "Claudia, if this man really is your husband, and he abandoned you and your daughter for 3 years, you need to be prepared for the possibility that his return is not for good reasons." She stared at Eduardo, the harsh reality of his words hitting her like a physical blow. "You think he found out that I work for you? That I now have a decent salary?" Eduardo didn't answer directly, his gaze falling on the stack of folders on his desk. With a sigh, he pulled one of them and opened it. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, his voice grave. "It won't be easy to hear." Claudia's heart quickened. "What did you do? After you told me about your grandmother, about Ana Laura, about your situation, I hired a private investigation agency." Eduardo met her gaze without flinching. "I wanted to help, but I needed to better understand what had happened." Claudia felt the blood drain from her face. "You investigated my husband without telling me anything?" "Yes," he admitted bluntly, "and I found answers that you may not be ready to hear." Claudia's hands trembled as Eduardo pushed the folder in her direction. For a moment, she couldn't touch it, as if the simple contact could burn her. "When?" she asked, her voice almost inaudible. "I started the investigation 3 months ago. We received the final report last week." "Before the man showed up at the reception," Claudia concluded. Eduardo nodded. "Long before." Gathering all her courage, Claudia finally opened the folder. The first pages contained basic information she already knew: Henry's personal data, details of the disappearance, police records. But then came the photos. Images dated 2 years ago, showing Henry entering an apartment in Portland, Oregon. More photos, more recent, Henry in a park, holding hands with a woman. And then the image that destroyed her last vestiges of doubt. Henry holding a small child, a boy of perhaps 2 years old, with his same eyes. The world seemed to disappear around Claudia. She felt like she was sinking into icy waters, the pressure increasing in her ears, her vision narrowing until all she could see were those photos, that irrefutable proof. "He has another family," she whispered, the words sounding strange in her own ears. "Yes," confirmed Eduardo, his voice gentle but firm. "Henry Santos lives in Portland under the name of Richard Mendez. He works as a salesman at a car dealership. The woman is called Lisa. The son, Daniel, is 2.5 years old." Claudia did a quick mental calculation. He got her pregnant 6 months after disappearing. Eduardo said nothing, just kept his eyes fixed on her, assessing her reaction. "Why did you show me this now?" she asked finally, closing the folder forcefully, unable to look any more. "Because I believe that the man who came here is him. And I believe he found out that you work for me, that your financial situation has improved." Eduardo paused. "People like him always return when they smell money, Claudia." The tears came then, not of sadness or pain, but of a raw anger that boiled inside her. 3 years. Her voice came out strangled. Ana Laura asking for her father. Every night, I checking hospitals, morgues, believing that something terrible had happened. She wiped away the tears forcefully. And all this time, he was building another life, as if we had never existed. Eduardo stood up, walking around the table to sit in the chair next to her. He didn't touch her, maintaining a respectful distance, but his presence was solid, comforting. "I'm so sorry," he said simply, "for having investigated or for what you discovered," she asked, unable to contain the bitterness. "For everything," he replied, "for overstepping boundaries without your consent, for bringing this pain, for you, having to go through this." Claudia took a deep breath, trying to regain control. "What do I do now? If he's looking for me?" "That depends entirely on you," Eduardo hesitated, "but I have an excellent lawyer. He can advise you on your rights, on retroactive support, on protection for you and Ana Laura." "I'm afraid of what he might do," Claudia admitted, her voice almost a whisper. "Not for me, but for my daughter. If he shows up at school, if he tries to take her, it won't happen." The firmness in Eduardo's voice left no room for doubt. "We'll increase school security. Jorge can pick up and drop off Ana Laura every day, and the 3 of you can temporarily move to one of the corporate apartments with 24-hour surveillance." Claudia looked at him, truly looked, seeing not just the successful businessman, but the man behind the facade. A man who, for some reason she still didn't fully understand, was willing to move mountains for her. "Why do you care so much?" she asked, the question escaping before she could stop it. Eduardo seemed surprised, as if the answer were obvious. "Because you matter, Claudia." Something changed between them at that moment, something subtle but profound, like tectonic plates shifting silently beneath the surface of the earth. "I need time," she said finally, "to process all this, to decide what to do." "All the time you need," he replied, returning to his side of the table, "and any support I can offer." When Claudia left the office hours later, the rain had stopped, leaving the air clean and the sky strangely clear for an autumn night. As she drove the borrowed company car, a luxury that still made her feel out of place, her thoughts weren't on her cheating husband, nor on the devastating revelations of the day, but on Eduardo's simple words. "Because you matter." How long had it been since someone said something like that to her? How long had she not felt truly seen, not as a mother, not as a granddaughter, not as an employee, but simply as Claudia? At home, she found Carol and Ana Laura playing cards at the kitchen table, laughing at some private joke. The scene, so normal and welcoming, brought a lump to her throat. These were the people who really mattered. These were the people for whom she would do anything. "Mommy," Anna Laura ran to hug her. "Grandma taught me how to play canasta. I won twice." Claudia hugged her daughter tightly, inhaling the scent of baby shampoo in her hair. She met Carol's eyes over the girl's head, and the silent understanding that passed between them said everything. Later, when Anna Laura was sleeping, they would talk, and Carol, as always, would help illuminate the path through the darkness. "I have an incredible story to tell," Claudia said, forcing a smile. "But first, show me how to play this canasta thing." As she shuffled the cards, a certainty formed in her heart. Whatever Henry's reason for reappearing now, she would not allow him to bring chaos to the life she had so carefully rebuilt. Not this time. Not anymore. 2 weeks had passed without a sign of Henry. Life continued at its fast pace. Meetings, spreadsheets, phone calls, school, homework, doctor visits. Claudia had accepted Eduardo's offer for her, Anna Laura and Carol, to temporarily move to one of Montenegro's corporate apartments. It was spacious, safe, and much closer to the office and school. Carol Lucia, initially reluctant to leave the small apartment where she had lived for decades, surprisingly adapted quickly to the new accommodation. "Old bones appreciate a good mattress," she joked, appreciating the comfort she had never allowed herself to desire. That Saturday morning, as Claudia prepared breakfast in the modern kitchen, Eduardo called. Weekend phone calls had become more frequent, surpassing the limits of the strictly professional. "Good morning." His voice carried that lighter tone that she had learned to associate with their personal conversations. "How are you all?" "Fine," she replied, balancing the phone between her shoulder and chin as she flipped pancakes. "Anna Laura wants to go to the park today. Carol is having a good day, almost without pain." "Great." There was a brief pause. "Actually, I called to invite you three to lunch. Nothing formal, just—" He hesitated, and Claudia could almost see him adjusting his tie in his characteristic gesture of nervousness. "Just a lunch, at my place." Claudia stopped what she was doing, surprised by the unexpected invitation. "Your place?" "Yes. I thought Anna Laura might like the pool, and there's a garden where Carol could sit comfortably. There was something in the way he mentioned each member of her family, considering their specific needs, that touched Claudia deeply." "Sounds lovely," she replied, smiling without realizing it. "What time?" "Can I have Jorge pick you up at noon?" "We'll be ready." "When?" She hung up. She found Carol watching her from the kitchen door, a knowing expression on her wrinkled face. "Who was it?" she asked, although her tone indicated that she already knew the answer. "Eduardo. He invited us to lunch at his house today." Carol shook her head, a slight smile curving her thin lips. "He's a good man, Claudia. He's my boss, Grandma." Claudia replied automatically, although the words sounded hollow even to her own ears. "Sure," the old woman replied with a touch of irony. "And I'm the Queen of England." Eduardo's house was exactly what Claudia expected: elegant, spacious, with a clearly masculine touch in the decoration, but surprisingly welcoming. Located in an exclusive condominium on the outskirts of Seattle, it overlooked a preserved forest reserve. Anna Laura was instantly enchanted with the infinity pool and the extensive garden. Carol found her place in a comfortable chair on the porch, enjoying the light breeze and the view. And Claudia watched Eduardo moving around the kitchen, preparing lunch himself, with a resourcefulness that surprised her. "I didn't know you cooked," she commented, leaning against the marble counter while he cut vegetables with professional precision. "My mother insisted I learn," he replied, with a nostalgic smile. "She said that no man should depend on others to feed himself." "Sounds like a wise woman." She was. His smile was tinged with sadness. "I lost my parents in an accident 7 years ago. They were returning from a trip to Europe." Claudia felt her heart clench at the evident pain in his voice. I'm so sorry. Thank you, Eduardo continued, cutting, his rhythm unchanged. You know, that's why I understand a little of what you went through with Henry, the uncertainty, the waiting. When the plane disappeared, we were 3 days without concrete news, 3 days that felt like an eternity. Claudia had never thought of that connection, that shared experience of loss and uncertainty. How did you overcome it? She asked, suddenly needing to know. Eduardo stopped what he was doing, looking at her directly. I didn't overcome it. I learned to live with it. There's a difference. The raw honesty of that answer hit her like a wave. They weren't comforting words from someone who had never felt similar pain, but the bare truth of someone who knew the way, because he had walked it. Lunch passed in a surprisingly relaxed atmosphere. Anna Laura charmed everyone with her stories from school. Carol shared old recipes with Eduardo, who promised to learn them, and Claudia, for the first time in a long time, felt part of something that almost felt like a family. After the meal, while Carol took a nap and Eduardo taught Anna Laura to float in the pool, under Claudia's watchful eye from the edge, her phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Hello?" she answered, moving away, a little to hear better. "Claudia!" The male voice on the other end made her blood run cold. "I finally found you. Henry." After 3 years, hearing that voice was like a nightmare coming true. Her legs weakened, and she needed to lean against the nearest wall. "How did you get my number?" she asked, struggling to keep her voice steady. "It doesn't matter. We need to talk." "We have nothing to talk about, Henry." The name came out like poison from her mouth, a heavy sigh on the other end. "I know you must be angry." "Angry?" Claudia let out a bitter laugh. "Angry is what we feel when someone is late for dinner. What I feel for you has no name." "Claudia, please." "It was a mistake. I was confused, with problems. I didn't know what to do." "Problems?" Her voice rose an octave. "I faced problems every day for the last 3 years. I never abandoned our daughter." The mention of Anna Laura provoked a pause on the other end. "How is she?" he asked, his voice suddenly soft. The audacity of that question made Claudia's anger explode. "You lost the right to ask that when you disappeared from her life. Anna Laura is no longer your daughter, Henry. She's mine. Only mine. Legally, I'm still her father." His voice hardened. "And I heard you now work for Eduardo Montenegro. You must be earning well." There it was, the real reason. Money. Always money. "What do you want, Henry?" "To meet you. To talk. To explain everything in person." He made a calculated pause. "I have rights, Claudia. I can demand visits, shared custody." The veiled threat hit her like a punch. Not for herself, but for the possibility of Anna Laura being exposed to that man, to that mess. "You have another family," she said, playing the card she was holding. "A 2-year-old son in Portland." The silence on the other end confirmed everything. How do you know that?" His voice wavered between surprise and fear. "I know everything, Henry. I know there was no kidnapping. I know you ran away. I know about Lisa, about Daniel." Each name was a small victory, taking control of the situation from him. "Do you really want to expose all this in court? Do you want your new family to know about the old one? Do you want your son to know that you abandoned another before him?" "You don't understand," he began, but Claudia interrupted him. "No, you don't understand. I'm willing to keep your secret, Henry. Not for you, but for Anna Laura. She deserves peace, but if you try to get close to her, if you try to use the law to force your way into our lives, I'll expose everything, every lie, every sordid detail." The heavy breathing on the other end indicated that her words had hit their target. "I need money, Claudia," he admitted finally, all pretense of reconciliation abandoned. "I'm in debt up to my neck. If you could—" "Goodbye, Henry." Claudia hung up, trembling from head to toe. When she turned around, she found Eduardo standing, a few feet away, watching her with concern. From his look, she knew he had heard enough to understand. It was him. It wasn't a question. Claudia nodded, unable to speak while the tears finally came, not of sadness, but of relief, of released anger, of invisible ropes being finally cut. Eduardo approached slowly, as if afraid to scare her, and extended his arms. Without hesitation, Claudia let herself be embraced, her body yielding against his, while sobs shook her. "It's over," he murmured against her hair. "You were amazing." "He wants money," she whispered, and he threatened to use Ana Laura as a bargaining chip. Eduardo pulled away enough to look her in the eyes, his hands gently holding her arms. "It won't happen," he said firmly. "Tomorrow we'll activate my lawyers. Declaration of abandonment, divorce proceedings, documentation of his new family. It will be quick and definitive." Claudia shook her head, wiping away the tears. "What if he tries something? What if he shows up at school?" "We've already increased security, remember? And now that we know he's made contact, we can be even more cautious." Eduardo hesitated, seeming to choose his next words carefully. "Claudia, I know it's not the ideal moment, but I need to say something I've been feeling for some time." Her heart quickened, a mixture of anticipation and fear, leaving her breathless. "I admired you from day one, for your strength, for your determination, but over time that admiration has turned into something more." He took a deep breath. "I'm in love with you, Claudia. I don't expect you to feel the same, and I understand that now, with all this happening—" "No," she interrupted him, surprising herself with the firmness of her voice. "Don't say you understand that it's not the moment. Don't say you can wait, because I'm tired of waiting, Eduardo, tired of postponing life because of ghosts." Before he could answer, she approached, and in an act of courage she didn't know she possessed, kissed him. It was a gentle kiss, almost. Shy at first, but that quickly deepened with years of repressed emotions, of loneliness, of desire for connection. When they finally separated, breathless, a noise made them turn. Ana Laura was standing at the patio door, watching them with wide eyes. For a terrible moment, Claudia feared her daughter's reaction, feared it was too early, that the girl wasn't ready. But then Ana Laura smiled, a radiant smile that lit up her whole little face, and ran to hug both of them. "Finally!" she exclaimed with the characteristic impatience of children. "It was taking so long." Eduardo laughed, surprised, while Claudia tried to process her daughter's reaction. "You don't mind?" she asked cautiously. Ana Laura rolled her eyes, exactly like Carol did when she thought a question was too obvious. "Eduardo is already more my dad than the other one," she replied with the brutal simplicity of children. "He comes to my recitals. He helps me with math. He takes care of Grandma." She shrugged. "And you smile more when he's around." Claudia's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were tears of astonishment at her daughter's perception, at the emotional wisdom of that little person she had raised alone. Eduardo crouched down, getting to Ana Laura's height. "Thank you for saying that," he said, with a seriousness that demonstrated how much he valued her words. "It means a lot to me." "Does this mean we're going to live in the house with the pool?" asked the girl, her childish pragmatism making the adults laugh. "Let's take it easy," Claudia interjected, catching her breath. "One step at a time, okay?" Ana Laura nodded, apparently satisfied with the answer, and ran back to the pool, leaving the adults watching her with a mixture of amazement and admiration. "She's incredible," commented Eduardo, interlacing his fingers with Claudia's. "She is," agreed she, squeezing his hand lightly, "and apparently much more perceptive than we imagined." While they watched Ana Laura playing in the water, Claudia felt a peace she hadn't experienced in years. Henry was still a threat to be faced. The divorce would be a painful process, and there was a long road ahead. But for the first time, she didn't feel alone on that journey. There was someone by her side, not a savior, not a protector, but a partner who valued her exactly for her strength, not despite it. The future, which for so long had seemed just a series of obstacles to overcome, now shone with unexplored possibilities, and Claudia was finally ready to embrace them. The divorce papers arrived on a spring morning when the first flowers colored the gardens of Seattle. Claudia stared at the official envelope for long minutes before finally opening it. Inside, the confirmation that she was legally free. The judge had granted the divorce for abandonment, maintained sole custody of Anna Laura, and ordered Henry to pay retroactive support. "How does it feel?" asked Carol, watching her from the kitchen. A door of the corporate apartment where they still lived. Claudia carefully folded the papers, storing them in the folder of important documents. "Free," she replied simply, like putting an end to a story that had ended a long time ago. In the past 2 months, her relationship with Eduardo had evolved with a surprising naturalness. He had become part of their lives gradually, without haste, respecting the time Claudia needed to heal old wounds. The phone rang, interrupting the conversation. It was Eduardo. "Good morning." His voice carried a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "I have a surprise. Can I come by after lunch to pick you 3 up?" "Sure," replied Claudia, the curiosity evident in her voice. "What kind of surprise?" "If I tell you, it won't be a surprise," he laughed. "I'll just say it's something you've been looking for a long time." When Eduardo arrived, he found the 3 ready and curious. The little detour turned out to be a car dealership in the Capitol Hill neighborhood. Eduardo parked in front of the gleaming showroom. "What are we doing here?" she asked, confused. "Your birthday is next week," he began, "and I know you don't like extravagant celebrations, so I thought I'd give you a present early." Inside the dealership, a salesman led them through the showroom to the back of the establishment, and there it was, a red Beetle. Not new and gleaming like those in the showroom, but perfectly restored, every original detail preserved with meticulous care. "It's not the same one," Eduardo explained. "I tried to find your original car to restore it, but it had already been dismantled. So I found one from the same year, same model, and had it completely restored." Anna Laura ran around the car, touching the shiny paint with admiration. Carol squeezed Claudia's arm in silent support. "It's perfect," said Claudia, her voice choked with emotion. "But Eduardo, it's too much. I can't accept something so expensive," he completed. "Claudia, I know how much that car meant to you. It wasn't just transportation. It was freedom. It was achievement. It was proof of your strength." He took her hands between his. "It's not just a car. It's a symbol of everything you've achieved alone, of your entire journey." "Thank you," whispered Claudia, squeezing his hands. "It's the most meaningful gift I've ever received." Eduardo smiled, and there was something in his gaze that made her realize that there was more to come. "The main surprise is still to come," he said. "Can we go?" Claudia drove the restored Beetle following Eduardo's directions. They drove to a quiet residential neighborhood on the outskirts of the city. Eduardo asked her to stop in front of a 2-story house with a small garden in front. "Whose house is this?" asked Claudia, turning off the engine. "At the moment, no one's," he replied with an enigmatic smile. "It's for sale. I thought you'd like to see it." The house was perfect. The spacious kitchen that Carol had always dreamed of, the roomy bedroom for Anna Laura, the cozy office for Claudia. There was even an adapted room on the ground floor for Carol, with her limited mobility. While the realtor showed the backyard, Eduardo pulled Claudia aside. "What do you think?" he asked anxiously. "It's beautiful," she replied honestly. "It seems like a home, but I don't understand. Why did you bring us to see a house for sale?" Eduardo took a deep breath, taking her hands in his. "Because I thought maybe it could be our house." The world seemed to freeze in that instant. Claudia looked at Eduardo, at Carol, who watched. From the porch, at Anna Laura, who played on the swing set. "Our?" she repeated, the word carrying immense weight. Eduardo nodded, his gaze never leaving hers. "I know it may seem rushed. That officially we've only been together for 2 months. But in reality, Claudia, we've been building this for much longer. He took a small box from his pocket. He didn't kneel. He seemed to understand that Claudia wasn't the kind of woman who would appreciate the theatrical gesture. Instead, he remained standing eye to eye as equals. I'm not just asking you to marry me. I'm asking you to build a life together. The four of us. A family. Claudia felt the air leave her lungs. It was everything she had always dreamed of and, at the same time, more than she had ever allowed herself to desire. She began, but the words failed. Eduardo waited patiently. You don't need to answer now. No, she interrupted. I do, because the answer has been clear for a long time, Eduardo. She took a deep breath, letting a smile spread across her face. Yes, to everything. To the wedding, to the house, to the family, to the future. Eduardo slid the ring on her finger, both their hands trembling slightly. Mummy said yes, shouted Ana Laura, running to hug them, followed by Carol. You knew? Asked Claudia, between laughter and tears. Eduardo asked for our permission weeks ago, revealed Carol. Ana Laura even helped choose the house. I said it. Needed to have a tree for a swing, declared the girl, and a room near yours and Uncle Eduardo's. And now it's going to be Daddy Eduardo, right? Asked Claudia softly. Ana Laura's face lit up. Can I really call you Dad now? Eduardo crouched down to get to her height. It would be the greatest honor of my life, Ana Laura. She threw herself into his arms with a cry of joy. 3 months later, on a sunny morning, Claudia was on the porch of the new house, watching Ana Laura and Eduardo planting flowers in the garden. Carol, sitting comfortably in a nearby chair, leafed through a travel guide of Italy, a birthday present from Eduardo to fulfill her dream of visiting her homeland. The red beetle gleamed in the driveway, no longer a symbol of her solitary struggle, but of a journey that had brought her there. Claudia contemplated the ring on her finger, not as a symbol of ownership as the old one had become, but of choice, of mutual promise. Thinking about something special? Asked Eduardo, approaching with dirt on his hands and the smile she loved so much. About how life takes turns we could never have predicted, she replied, accepting his hug despite his dirty hands. Any regrets? He asked softly. Claudia looked at Ana Laura, helping Carol to get up, at the house they had transformed into a home, at the man who loved her not despite her scars, but with them. None, she replied with conviction. Every step, every mistake, every pain brought me here, to you, to us. As they walked together to join her daughter and grandmother, Claudia knew that she had finally found what she had been searching for her whole life, not just a place to call home, but people with whom to share it. The old red beetle would wait patiently in the garage, ready to transport them on new adventures, but the real journey, the journey of the heart, had already found its destination.